The ongoing discussion about Jake Paul stepping into the ring against Gervonta Tank Davis has sparked a massive storm in the boxing world, bringing forward opinions from fighters, promoters, analysts, and even fans who view the matchup as both fascinating and controversial. The backdrop of this debate begins with the observation that Davis recently came off a draw. In the traditional spirit of boxing, many feel that an immediate rematch would have been the most competitive and honorable step to take. If Davis wanted to prove himself as the elite athlete he claims to be, going back into the ring against the same opponent to resolve unfinished business seemed like the proper choice. Instead, the option he accepted was a spectacle bout against Jake Paul, a man who has transitioned from social media personality into professional boxing and has managed to create high-profile opportunities through attention, marketing, and controversy. The fight itself is scheduled as an exhibition, and from the beginning it has been described by many as a money grab. From one perspective, it is understandable. Davis, at a vulnerable point in his career, was given an offer for staggering financial gain. Reports have thrown around numbers like $200 million. For anyone, even a world champion, such an offer is hard to turn down. The only condition, however, that many purists emphasize is that Davis should return to meaningful boxing afterward. If he secures his payday, fans argue, then it is fine, but he should not abandon the real sport entirely. Training camps have been in full swing, with Jake Paul focusing on enhancing his size and raw power, while Tank Davis has been sharpening his speed and knockout precision. This has become a major talking point, because the matchup pits an explosive but smaller fighter against a far bigger, stronger man with natural advantages in reach, height, and weight. Analysts constantly revisit this concern, debating whether Davis's skill and sharpness can overcome such a massive physical gap. Shakur Stevenson weighed in on the broader trend of unconventional boxing matchups. He made it clear that fights like Paul versus Davis bring little real value to the sport. To him, they are distractions, pulling attention away from genuine competition. However, he drew an important distinction. If legends like Floyd Mayweather and Mike Tyson were to step back into the ring, even in exhibition form, Stevenson argued that such events would carry a completely different meaning. Those men are already cemented icons, fighters who have given their lives and legacies to the sport. If they choose to cash in on their reputations for nostalgia and entertainment, Stevenson finds no problem with it. For Jake Paul and Tank Davis, though, it is different. Davis is still an active champion, still part of the competitive landscape. Instead of going after rematches and proving dominance in his own division, he is walking into a spectacle that, Stevenson said, is more like WWE than boxing. From the business side, however, another argument emerges. Had Davis chosen the rematch and lost, the financial appeal of a Jake Paul fight would have dropped significantly. By taking the Paul fight now, Davis ensures the largest possible payday. It may not be the bravest move competitively, but from a pragmatic standpoint, it is defensible. For Stevenson and fighters who hold a competitor's mentality, though, this decision carries less respect. Dana White, the president of the UFC, gave his own blunt reaction. He admitted that very few genuine fight fans were excited by the matchup. Still, he said it could provide Davis with exposure and money at a time when he needed both. Davis had been facing challenges outside the ring, issues that damaged his momentum and limited his opportunities. When Jake Paul offered a high-profile fight with financial security attached, Davis accepted. Dana White, however, shocked many by saying Jake Paul could realistically win. He emphasized that this would not be because Paul is the better technical boxer, but because of sheer size and physical attributes. Paul is bigger, stronger, and longer. Davis may have knockout power, but he usually delivers it against fighters his own size. Against someone far heavier and taller, the task is much harder. White argued that the outcome would not be about who is more skilled, but about whether a smaller champion could handle the overwhelming frame of a larger man. He even admitted that he would rather see Davis face legitimate names in his division, fighters like Shakur Stevenson, Keyshawn Davis, Emmanuel Navarrete, or Lamont Roach. To him, those are real boxing matches that contribute to the sport. Yet, in the modern world of spectacle, what sells most are crossover exhibitions. The issue of public perception plays a big role here. If Davis manages to drop Jake Paul despite being the smaller man, it would create an iconic visual, one that would be replayed forever. But if Davis himself were to be dropped, even though he is at a natural disadvantage, the damage to his reputation could be devastating. Fans and casual viewers might not understand the size disparity fully. They would only see a world champion knocked down by a man they perceive as a YouTuber. This is the danger that Paulie Malignaggi emphasized when he offered his perspective. Malignaggi, a former world champion himself, highlighted how often in boxing history smaller fighters run into trouble when moving too far up in weight. He recognized Davis as an elite fighter, but he cautioned that skill does not always erase size differences. Malignaggi explained that Paul's natural frame and his raw punching power could create serious problems. The issue is not about who is more talented, but about physical limits. Even the sharpest fighter can be neutralized by overwhelming size and strength. For Malignaggi, Davis has more to lose in this scenario. Analysts have also pointed out how these dynamics affect Davis's career arc. Instead of pursuing rematches or rivalries that could build his legacy, he is choosing what critics see as a shortcut to money. Some argue that Davis was put into a position to help boxing grow, but has not fulfilled that role. Rewarding him with a lucrative exhibition may undermine the sport further. Adding to the spectacle, the fight's venue created another controversy. The original location declined to host the event, with officials reportedly dismissing it as more of a circus than a legitimate contest. This refusal surprised many, as the arena was considered ideal for generating revenue. Promoters quickly scrambled to secure a new site, eventually landing on Atlanta's State Farm Arena, home of the Hawks. Yet the Georgia Athletic Commission publicly stated they would not sanction the bout. The commissioner even accused promoters of falsely advertising the event. He said no commission wanted to be responsible for sanctioning or even approving such a mismatch, not even as an exhibition. He called the whole idea a blatant money grab. The criticism continued from former fighters like Carl Froch, who bluntly dismissed Jake Paul's career as one based entirely on money rather than legacy. Froch argued that Paul carefully selects opponents who bring attention, but not necessarily the toughest challenge. While this strategy works for marketing, it prevents Paul from being respected as a true competitor. Froch added, however, that if the payday were offered to him, he would accept it and beat Paul easily. His harshest statement was that Paul is useless as a boxer, incapable of competing at a real elite level. Nate Diaz, an MMA star, outright dismissed the fight. He refused to offer a prediction, saying it was not a legitimate sporting contest, but a spectacle designed purely for sales. In his view, such fights damage boxing's credibility. To Diaz, the event is neither competition nor meaningful, so he would not even entertain it as serious analysis. Ryan Garcia also weighed in, comparing such matchups to WWE. While he admitted that they generate attention and conversation, he expressed concern that they pull boxing further toward entertainment rather than sport. Yet he admitted he was curious to watch, as many fans are. The core debate always circles back to the glaring size difference. Jake Paul, who fights at cruiserweight around 200 pounds, is naturally over 50 pounds heavier than Davis. He is nearly a foot taller and accustomed to fighting larger men. Davis, by contrast, is a 5'5" lightweight, usually competing at 130 to 135 pounds. His explosiveness and power have dominated similar-sized opponents, but facing someone as physically imposing as Paul raises new questions. Would Davis be able to get inside without taking heavy punishment? Could his power carry up enough to hurt a much larger frame? Or would Paul's size simply absorb the blows while allowing him to dictate range and tempo? The announcement of the fight as an exhibition, streamed on Netflix on November 15th in Atlanta, only added to the spectacle narrative. Fans began questioning whether Tank Davis was cashing out, nearing retirement, or simply taking the biggest payday available before stepping away. Some suggested it could be one of his last fights, as he seemed uninterested in pursuing titles or rivalries anymore. For Jake Paul, who had just broken into cruiserweight rankings at number 14 after beating Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., the choice was equally telling. Instead of fighting other ranked contenders, he too opted for a money fight. This has led many analysts to conclude that both men are prioritizing attention and financial gain over competitive merit. Jake Paul, in particular, has built his entire boxing strategy around maximizing headlines. The Paul brothers, both Jake and Logan, have repeatedly shown that they do not worry about critics. Every controversy fuels more attention. Whether praised or mocked, they dominate conversation by orchestrating polarizing events. For them, it is not about legacy, but about visibility. Their opponents are carefully chosen to balance clout, skill, and weakness in a way that ensures both danger and marketability. Critics say this approach twists the narrative of boxing. When Jake or Logan beat an opponent, they sometimes act as though they are better boxers overall, ignoring the advantages they had going in. Logan, for example, claimed status after facing Floyd Mayweather despite the fight being an exhibition with a 60-pound weight difference. Similarly, Jake may act as though beating Davis proves something about his skills, when in reality, the massive size difference skews the entire equation. Despite the criticisms, the fight continues to draw attention. Analysts note that in today's entertainment-driven sports culture, blockbuster events matter more than pure merit. Promoters look for maximum eyes, not necessarily the fairest or most competitive matchups. Jake Paul versus Tank Davis embodies this trend fully. It is a fight that makes little sense from a sporting perspective, but makes perfect sense as a spectacle. At the end of the day, the voices from across the combat world remain split. Shakur Stevenson dismisses it as harmful to boxing. Dana White sees business logic, but still believes Paul's size gives him a realistic chance. Paulie Malignaggi warns about the dangers of size differences even for elite fighters. Carl Froch mocks Paul as useless, but admits the money is tempting. Nate Diaz dismisses it altogether. Ryan Garcia compares it to WWE but admits he will watch. The Georgia Commission rejects it outright, calling it a sham. Promoters continue to push it as a must-see blockbuster, with Netflix securing the rights. Fans remain torn, some disgusted, others curious, but almost all paying attention. The debate reveals more about the state of modern boxing than about Davis or Paul themselves. The sport is increasingly shaped not only by champions and contenders, but by spectacle, attention, and crossover events. For some, this is the death of tradition. For others, it is simply the evolution of entertainment in a world where headlines matter more than hierarchy. Whatever the outcome of the exhibition, it will be remembered not as a pure sporting contest, but as another chapter in boxing's struggle between legitimacy and spectacle.